We're very excited to share some information with you about some upcoming or available funding now, along with some technology and some equipment made to help us improve our indoor air quality in our schools. My name is Mike Freeman. I'm one of the product managers here at Behler-Young Company. Indoor air quality is the leading contributor to absenteeism in schools and in workplaces. And we're not just talking about the current pandemic, we're talking about overall air quality in general. Allergies, mold, dust, common cold, and other biologics all contribute to sick building syndrome. And we want to give you some tools to help alleviate that in schools and in other facilities as well. Just a quick run through of our agenda this morning. I'll run through some introductions of some of the people that'll be speaking today. I'm going to review Hardy's 6 steps to safer schools. We're going to talk about ESSER funds and how they can help fund some of these improvements that are in or to make in these schools. We've got some special guests from the Carrier Corporation and RGF Environmental. And then we'll wrap up and we'll take a few questions. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer those at the end. As I said, my name's Mike Freeman. I'm one of the product managers here at Behler-Young Company. We're going to be joined later by Brian Menigan, who's from the Carrier Corporation. He specializes in government solutions. Holly Rhodes is the Associate Director of Indoor Air Quality at Carrier Corporation. She's going to talk about some of the innovative equipment that they have. And then we'll be joined by Dr. James Marsden, the Executive Director of Science and Technology at RGF Environmental. So a short time ago, Hardy introduced their 6 steps for safer schools. We all know that modern air conditioning and HVAC systems are a very technical piece of the building equation. And their first step that they recommend to a safer school is hiring a licensed contractor to maintain and service the HVAC system. A lot of times the existing maintenance personnel, they have a lot of skills, and the modern HVAC system requires specific skills and specific equipment to help maintain those systems to keep them in their top operating condition. Improving building ventilation is critical to helping control the spread of allergens and other biologic contaminants. Circulating fresh air from outside with interior air can dramatically reduce the spread of indoor air contaminants. Utilizing effective filtration by replacing your current filters and maintaining those filters not only reduces wear and tear on your HVAC system, but it also dramatically improves the quality of the air within the environment. Looking for things like MERV ratings on filters and using filters that are designed to work specifically with your system. And just because something has a higher MERV rating doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work with your system currently, which is why we recommend working with a licensed contractor to make sure that those changes are all compatible with each other. We want to talk about utilizing, jumped ahead there, utilizing UV light treatment to treat the airstream itself. Installing UV light sources in your existing ductwork has been proven to inactivate a variety of biologic contaminants, including COVID-19, MRSA, and influenza. Installation is generally simple, relatively simple, and can be done during normal work hours in many cases. Step number 5 they recommend is controlling humidity in the environment. Maintaining a level of 40 to 60% relative humidity in your building has been proven to make viruses less viable. And additionally, properly managed humidity can help eliminate musty odors, mold, and mildew. Finally, utilizing ionization in the circulated airstream. Ionization causes particles to accept positive and negative charges, and when the oppositely charged particles come near each other, they clump together and they either fall to the floor or they become trapped in the existing filters. This process dramatically improves the spread of contaminants and improves the efficiency of your filtering system. Next, we want to talk about ESSER funds. And ESSER is Elementary and Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Fund. At the end of 2020, we passed ESSER 2, and then just last Thursday, President Biden signed ESSER 3 as part of the latest relief package. Between those two packages, there were over $250 billion distributed to the states. The state of Michigan alone, we estimate will end up with a total of $4.5 billion through the Title I application process. And Brian's going to speak about this a little bit further in just a few minutes. There are two items in ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 that specifically address building maintenance and HVAC improvements, and you can see those on your screen. Line item P specifically is for improving ventilation in schools. And so this money can be used for making those types of improvements. Next, I'd like to turn it over to Brian Mennigan and Holly Rhodes from the Carrier Corporation, who are going to speak about some of the things that Carrier can offer, and as well as a deeper explanation into ESSER funds and how they can be used to improve the environment within our school system. Brian, feel free to take it away.
Well, thanks, Mike. And it's really a pleasure to speak with everybody on the phone today. For the Irish people out there, happy early St. Patrick's Day. So Holly, if you can go to the next slide.
Yeah. Mike, if you could go ahead and stop sharing, I can go ahead and share our content then.
All right. Maybe.
So while Holly's doing that, so as Mike was, just to explain a little bit of background on myself, and I'm a talker, so keeping it 10 minutes is going to be really like, I'm going to have to do yes and no answers. So, but I've understood the ESSER money is particularly the three main reasons and this is from any state that's out there is that what money am I going to get? How much am I going to get it? And how do I go about getting it? And in those sense, this is kind of like a very short description of really strategically getting to those points. Next slide, Hal. So as Mike was talking about, it's a very interesting process. And honestly, everybody talks about there's CARES Act money. We're going to talk about CARES Act money plus the CRRSA, which is either omnibus or the appropriation that was signed by the last administration, and then the American Rescue Plan. All in total, I always like to reference it towards CARES Act. The local LEAs in the state of Michigan is going to get 13.4 times their CARES Act in the next 3 months. That is a huge influx of sources that we're gonna navigate through in this conversation. We're also going to talk a little about the GER, because everything is a part of an education stabilization fund. And I thought would be good just to put a little bit of a capstone on this is that being public entities, we always have to put things out to bid, but there's cooperative purchasing and how to purchase directly through the statutes that are in all states, but particularly for Michigan. Next slide. So I really like to geek out to this type of stuff. But I know it's super complicated, but there's a really simple flow to it. And I think it's starting from the top. So the three sources of money, two that are present and one that's on its way, were all money that was appropriated from, and more importantly, grant money that doesn't have to be paid back from the federal government. As whether we're talking about CARES, we're talking about CRRSA or the American Rescue Plan, those trillions and billions of dollars that were associated to those all went into individual verticals that were broken up to strategically target multiple different things. One that we're talking about today is the K through 12 and ESSER. So that in order to get into that ESSER fund, it had to be funneled through what you see here as the Education Stabilization Fund. This fund basically houses the three main entities that target both K through 12 and higher education, your community colleges along with your state-run universities. Again, we're going to leave that off, but that is also where they get their money. The GER, or better known as the Governor Education Emergency Relief, takes a percentage of money from the Education Stabilization Fund and strategically targets other LEAs out there, that LEAs are school districts, local school districts, to help them out with additional funding that might not have been appropriated. Now, just to take a step back, one of the things about trying to understand that first question of, where's the money going from, the methodology, and I think it's really important, the methodology of how a state gets a certain percentage and then how that state breaks down its percentage to its LEAs is all based on Title I money. So everything that's associated to a school's Title I percentage works all the way up to its state, then works all the way up to the ESSER fund. That's how this is all broken down. It's just more of understanding the question of how much money am I getting is based on that Title I application. We won't dive too deep into there, but that Title I application allows you to see in the upper right-hand side how you can use your funds. And there's A through D of those funds, but the one that we're talking about today and one that has been promoted mostly for ESSER 2 is the going back into school, in-person learning, and mostly how to do indoor air quality assessments and improvements. That is crucial because the Title I-D is where the facilities come in for that type of improvement. Before we move over, the idea of following the money from the trillions down to the millions, down to the overall, billions, down to the overall ESSER funds, this is where the large amount of funds are going to be focused into the individual state or individual public schools. Next slide. So with that, the state of Michigan is looking to get, or projected to get, $5.6 billion in the total amount of ESSER fundings funneling into K through 12. That will be appropriated through that methodology to the overall school districts themselves, or LEAs. Now, I'm not going to reiterate that here, but what I'm going to say is the next crucial piece, and we'll answer to the last question, which is, how do I use it? Now, Mike talked about, and I believe he showed very well, that how to request this money and what you need for to be appropriated that funds. It clearly states in this, which Mike can send out to you, which is found off the state education's website, is the memorandum from the governor stating that to the SEAs that you can use for ESSER 2 funding, you can use to improve indoor air quality. Now, those solutions fit multiple different types of products, and those products carry or offer. One of the biggest things to focus in on is the idea of the 3 indoor air quality measures, whether to get that funding, which is ventilation, filtration, and relative humidity. Those are the key aspects of improving indoor air quality in order to get your individual LEAs appropriated money. And the other thing before we leave this slide, the biggest thing to take home is this money that's coming from ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 is not going to be reappropriated like the CARES Act money. If you didn't spend CARES Act money by the spring of this year, then it goes back to the SEAs and then goes through its overall, everybody's money that wasn't used gets reallocated through that same methodology and pushed back down. ESSER 2 funding, and we believe ESSER 3 funding, does not have a reappropriation methodology of having that. That is your money for that particular school district. Now, they do have to use it till September 30th of 2023, and CARES Act reappropriate money has to be used by September 30th of 2022. Next slide. So, and you can just push through this. So overall, the way that you typically purchase through a local entity is through is through public bidding. But because of federal money and being an emergency situation, procurement from ESSER 1 to ESSER 2 to get back to being in person, and the idea that it's a mitigation strategy, not an improving strategy, basically saying that you have to go back to school and not have the choice of whether you're going back to school. In order to do these measures, to use this money to follow a solution, you can't take the time to go out there and put together bid documents and then have it go through the state education department to be stamped or approved for the stamp and come through. So ways to procure quickly is these cooperative purchasing. And every state, like I mentioned, has its ability to purchase directly. And there's a couple of, and purchasing directly would be using contracts that you might be familiar with, like Sourcewell, E&I, Omni Partners, AEPA. Those contracts have a pre-compete solicitation that every manufacturer has the ability to win, and then offer their services as to their best, offering their pricing as best customers. I just want to hit on this because there's a lot of things that have to be done in a short period of time. And when you have to try to put together documents and then look at the bid, evaluate it, and then secure it, you're going to be all the way into the middle of summer, and that's really hard to appropriate those funds. So this I think is an additional piece to maybe take home and to look at how to actually procure quickly. So next slide. So I hope that this is a very condensed. I hope it was targeted. I am here to answer any more of your questions at the end or further, but I really appreciate the time and look forward to supporting your questions. So I turn it back over to Holly.
All right, thanks, Brian. Just a couple of quick resources we posted on here as well from Brian's pieces if you want to know more about those in the future as well. I'm going to just hit on in just a few minutes here real quick, because I know we have some other topics to get to as well, is Brian mentioned about, filtration being one of the aspects that is a key focus area for returning to school, as you all know, or expanding the number of in-person days. Making sure that you are aware of our OptiClean products. So we're very, very proud of this product, and we'll cover it in just a little bit. I'm going to actually skip through this first slide because Brian covered that a little bit, and again, you can review it in the documents afterwards. But this OptiClean product was developed actually initially in response to the pandemic as a negative air machine to help hospitals manage the air quality within an actual hospital room with an infected patient. As we continue to use it, it does have an even broader application outside of hospitals as what we call an air scrubber, or if you're familiar with the term air purifier, it's just a really large version of an air purifier. And it is a fantastic piece. Like I mentioned, it's one of Time's top inventions for 2020. So we're extremely proud of that recognition for this product. It does have a HEPA filter, long life HEPA filter in there. So it captures 99.97 of the particle matter down to 0.3 microns, which if you're not familiar, 0.3 microns is actually the hardest size particle to capture and to influence the behavior on. So it's really highly effective into that. From an application standpoint on site for you, it is a very simple setup process. It's attaching the caster wheels. It's making sure that there's a piece of cardboard removed from the filter, and then you plug it into the wall and it's up and running. So it's a great, easy deployment of these products, great filtration level that you can make sure you take advantage of. That was developed, specifically and in good use across a lot of school systems today. Again, and just kind of where we've seen some of these things used, we have two different sizes of the product. So there's one that's a 600 CFM, which generally covers a 600 square foot space, but then also there's a 1500 CFM unit. So covering up to 1500 square foot on average. We can cover more. It's got 5 different fan speeds on it that you can adjust from the front of the unit. So you really can manage the airflow pretty simply with these units as well. Filter replacement is often a question too. So there's a MERV 7 pre-filter that's replaced about every 6 months. And then the HEPA filter depends on use, but there is a filter light indicator that will come on in the front of the unit when it's ready to be replaced. Up to 3 to 4 years is the life on some of those filters. So good amount of time and from a product management standpoint. And so I know we're getting a little bit low on time, so I'll end that here for us, and wanted to make sure that we had time to cover the other topics as well.
Thank you so much, Holly, and Brian as well. Really appreciate your input and detail about the products and the funding. And again, if you guys have questions, please make sure to post them in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer those at the end. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. James Marsden, the Executive Director of Science and Technology at RGF Environmental Group. And he's going to talk about some of the innovative products that they've come up with. I've been having great success in things like restaurants and getting restaurants back open. Dr. Marsden, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jim Marsden with RGF Environmental. I want to talk this morning about really a more advanced approach that builds on the other things that have been talked about: ventilation, filtration, and relative humidity. This approach involves the creation of hydrogen peroxide molecules. And I think you can move to the next slide.
Hey, Phil, can you put that in presentation mode, please? Thank you.
Great, thank you. So what we have, it's a long word, photohydroionization, but it's really a simple concept. It's the oxidation of water molecules, or H2O, to form H2O2, or hydrogen peroxide. So we just add an extra oxygen molecule to that water molecule. But the difference is enormous in that hydrogen peroxide is one of the most effective antimicrobial agents known. So these molecules of hydrogen peroxide are positioned so that they reach an equilibrium in a treated environment and will inactivate viruses, bacteria, mold spores, and so on, any microorganism. So we'll talk about that a little bit as we continue. We also have UVC coil disinfection. UVC has already been mentioned, and it is an effective antimicrobial, but it's a line of sight antimicrobial, so a little different than the PHI, or photohydroionization, which does utilize UV, but as an energy source versus a direct decontamination source like the coil disinfection. Some of the RGF devices that incorporate PHI also have ionization. So it's built into the same device. The Remy Halo, for example, includes an ionizer, and any RGF device can be equipped with an ionizer. So if it's a commercial application where we would use perhaps a package unit, that also can incorporate an ionizer. So we have the effect of the hydrogen peroxide molecule, very effective antimicrobial, plus the ionization effect. So it's a combination of the two, which can be quite effective. And again, I'll get into some reports from scientific studies that we've conducted in a moment. You can see from the photograph here that there is a UV lamp in this cell. The UV lamp is in a grid configuration, or inside a grid configuration. You can see on the lower photo. And that grid contains proprietary catalyst, which catalyze that reaction of water molecules to peroxide in a very efficient manner. So what this cell is doing is creating hydrogen peroxide at low concentrations. The concentrations are in the parts per billion range, so well below any kind of regulatory limit, but large numbers of molecules, which when brought into a treated environment, readily inactivate SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes COVID-19, any type of bacterial pathogen that may be harmful to people in that environment, and also mold spores is very effective for that as well. Next slide, please. It comes in various configurations so that it can be matched from an engineering perspective into any environment. Any space that can be air conditioned can be treated with this system. So it's a wide range of configurations that really meet any demand whatsoever. It's very easy to install. RGF does recommend professional installation, but that the installation can be done in just a matter of minutes, whether it be a Remy Halo that is attached to the HVAC system, or a package unit that magnetically attaches to the air conditioning system on a roof. It's, as I say, just a few minutes, maybe 30 minutes at most to properly install it. The unit on the bottom is different. It's not a PHI unit. It's an ozone generator, which is intended to create ozone in higher concentrations if there's an incident that requires special treatment. And it's not intended for occupied spaces. It's intended to be done in a room that's been cleared of people, of course, and it virtually can sterilize an environment in the event of, say, a norovirus outbreak or some environment or some issue that requires complete disinfection. Next slide, please. RGF has a robust product development function where the company's been around for 36 years. We didn't just form in response to the COVID pandemic. It's been around for a long time and been developing products for a number of years. One of the products that you see here was a walkthrough system designed to create a safe space that can be immediately affected. We're very actively involved in how to best engineer solutions for COVID-19. It was said already that we're working with a lot of restaurants. I myself, I was at Chipotle for 4 years and implemented these technologies in every Chipotle restaurant, in HVAC systems, in restrooms, and in ice machines. And this was for controlling norovirus. It was prior to COVID, but a lot of success across the food industry in general. I was at K-State, Kansas State University for 21 years and did a lot of research on the technologies there and documented the effectiveness of PHI in combination with ionization against a number of important pathogens. Next slide, please. We're allied with a number of companies, as you can see. One of the things I want to mention about RGF is, and schools in particular, this is a very natural way to accomplish disinfection in an environment, very similar to what the sunlight does naturally. So if you look at the safest place to be in this pandemic is outdoors in the sunlight. Sunlight also creates hydrogen peroxide molecules, which are very effective at inactivating microbes in the outdoor environment. It does this in a very similar fashion, really using the same chemistry as we use at RGF. Sunlight also has an ionization effect. So again, very, very similar. And what we're after is, again, molecules of hydrogen peroxide. Molecules of hydrogen peroxide are safe at the very low levels that we produce, whether it be the sun or an RGF device. They're safe for occupied spaces or outdoors. They don't even come close to any kind of regulatory limit. As I said, we're in parts per billion versus a regulatory. So it's a very effective and clean way to accomplish disinfection. Next slide, please. And I want to make the point finally that this is an active system. Mostly what we've talked about before are passive systems. If we filter, it's effective, but it's a passive system. It's done after the fact. So even the best filters filter after you've had an opportunity to breathe the hazard. So filters are important. We make filters at RGF, and they're an important component of the solution. But it's different than an active system that's projecting active molecules of an antimicrobial into the treated environment. So we're not waiting for a filter, we're not just moving the virus from point A to point B, we're actually inactivating it. And I'll show you in a minute a slide that shows how effective it is. Next slide, please. This has been done in office buildings. This shows a little video about how it works. We may be short of time, so I'll skip past that anyway. Some of as I said, we've tested all kinds of microbes, viruses, important bacteria like methicillin-resistant staph. It's also effective at reducing VOCs and odors. It does so very quickly and very effectively. And with the ionization component, it causes particles to agglomerate and fall out of the air much more quickly. Next slide. Next slide again. So other applications. This shows a summary of one of the studies that we did. This is a testing that we did on SARS-CoV-2, the actual virus that causes COVID-19, and this particular study, and we've done several now, resulted in a 99.9 inactivation of the virus. So the virus wasn't just moved, it was actually destroyed in that indoor space. Next slide, please. Next slide again. Do we have one more slide?
Nope, that's the last slide I got.
Okay, I think Mike has a slide on his slide set, and I can just talk through it. I don't even necessarily need the slide. But I one more point I want to make, and that is that the numbers that I just put up there in terms of inactivation, that study was done on surfaces. And really pretty much all the studies that you see on SARS-CoV-2 inactivation or surrogates that may be used instead of the SARS-CoV-2 are surface reductions. We weren't satisfied with that. So we worked with a California lab to develop a method for actually measuring reductions in the air, not surfaces, but in the air. So we used a large chamber, 1,280 cubic feet. We aerosolized the virus into that chamber, and we collected air samples with air sampling devices and measured the reductions that occurred over time. We repeatedly nebulized the virus into that chamber to simulate things like a cough or sneeze or something that might happen when a person that's infected causes an indoor environment to become infected. And what we found here was in the air, not surfaces, but in the air, we got a 5-log reduction, which is 99.999% of the virus inactivated. Very, very effective. So I want to make the point that not only can we inactivate viruses and bacteria, microbes on surfaces, we've now shown that we can do that same thing in air, which really is what this is all about. The SARS-CoV-2 virus, about 80% of the time, is moved on small particles, 1 micron or less. The idea that it's associated with just a sneeze or a cough really is obsolete now. It's carried in the air on very small particles, and it's important to be able to neutralize those particles in order to make safe indoor environments. So that's all I have. I hope I stayed close to 10 minutes anyway. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marsden. Really appreciate your insight there. Phil, if you could unshare your screen, we'll go ahead and I'll get mine back up. And there's the graph that Dr. Marsden was just talking about that shows the effectiveness over time of eliminating the SARS-CoV-2 virus. I just really want to take this opportunity to thank all of our guests for coming in and sharing the information that they presented. This has, I think, been very valuable to everyone. Just to reiterate, make sure that, for most effective reopening of our schools, we want to follow those 6 steps for safer schools, utilizing licensed contractors. As we discussed, multiple technologies work best together, filtration, humidity, and UV and ionization, all working together will create the safest environment, both at school and at work. And most importantly, please be safe and kind to one another. It's a tough time for everybody, And just wanted to thank you. If you have any additional questions, I didn't see anything come up in the chat box. Carrie, can you confirm that we don't have anything?
Correct.
Okay, cool. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us at IEQ@Behler-Young.com. And thank you again for attending. Have a great day. Be safe out there.
Mike, we do have one now.
We do.
So no grant money for businesses or individuals, question mark.
The ESSER2 funds, and Brian or Holly, feel free to correct me. Those are specifically for schools.
Yes, but it's a part of a portion of the overall stimulus or grant money. So depending on where you are, depending on what classification. So individuals, you've heard your $1,400 checks and the $600 checks before. There is also, and I can send this information to you, Mike, but there's three other major buckets of money that are coming in: state and local government, transportation, healthcare. Those are all receiving large sums of money, particularly leftover money from their CARES Act. And then there was no money for that in the omnibus or the CRRSA, but the American Rescue Plan does have a considerable amount of funding for those. So a local business, there might be potential for them to apply for grant money through their county or some way through there, because just to wrap it up, there is private schools actually were allotted $2.7 billion through the ESSER fund, and so there's probably some of that within the rest of businesses through the counties. So hope that helps out.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian.
Welcome.
Are there any other questions before we end for today?
Just 1 second. It looks like we have. Just a comment. If we can send those programs out, we can send a copy of the presentations, I believe, as well as a copy of this this session.
Yes.
Recorded session.
Yep. And then later in the week, I believe we'll have some additional documentation available. So we'll find a way to post that and promote it as well.